Okay, I have learned not to trust this little bar that tells me that I'm going to be alive in like a minute, and I am in fact already alive. Which I think I am. I'm like a full minute early, so we might chat for a minute. I have decided to take off my glasses because I'm recording a read, eat, repeat for the YouTube channel. Mobile Public Library has a YouTube channel, in case you didn't know. And we do book recommendations there and crafts. We actually had so much kids stuff that we now have a separate kids channel on YouTube as well. There's story times over there, more crafts, all sorts of stuff. If you're interested, you should absolutely check them out. I know Jill does a really good job. Jill and Brittany do a really good job with YouTube stuff, so I thought I'd contribute. I'm gonna review Guilty Admissions, which you guys have heard. The college cheating scandal book that comes out in February. It is 11 o'clock. So I think we are fully live. And I can stop rambling. But yeah, I was recording for Read, Eat, Repeat, and I found the reflection of the circle of the light in my glasses really annoying when I was watching it back. I was like, so everyone who's looking at me has to stare at that too. Maybe I should try to do it without my glasses, because my eyesight's okay, not awful, but I still need glasses, so we shall see. This might be a disaster. All right, welcome to Tea and New Book Tuesday. I'm Lisa. I'm a librarian here at Ben May Main Library. Let's go ahead and share my screen so you can see things that I can't see. There we go. All right, Tea and New Book Tuesday. So for my tea today, I'm drinking Tazo's Vanilla Bean Macaron again because it's one of my favorites. In today's episode, we're going to discuss nonfiction. The last few nonfictions that I didn't want to get out of February without telling you about. My February audiobooks that are coming out. So every book that I've mentioned that also we're buying the audiobook for. All of those. And some genre stuff. So a mix of science fiction. I don't think there's any horror today, but there's definitely some fantasy. So that'll be fun. I am reading Bloodline right now. I think I'm about halfway in. It's interesting. I don't know where she's going with it yet, which is really nice. It's nice to read a book that's like that. I'm trying to mix it in with some nonfiction, so I'll read like a chapter of my nonfiction, then read a couple chapters of this at night. So I'm going through it a little slower, but that's not a reflection of the book. I should have it done, though, by next Tuesday, so I'll be able to give you a review then. I don't know what I'm going to read after that. We'll see. There's some stuff this week that I kind of think I might want to read, including today's giveaway, which is going to be a surprise. And those of you who've watched me more than a few times will probably know what that means, but we'll get there when we get there. Okay, moving on. If you haven't had a chance to stop by West Regional Library lately, I think you should consider it because we have, in partnership with the Tuskegee Institute, Unframed Images. The exhibit is displaying 14 reproductions from the renowned African-American photographer Prentice Herman, or P.H. Polk. It'll be up until March 1st. I haven't gotten a chance to see it. I keep trying to get any excuse to run out to West and get a chance to look at it, but I think it'll be really interesting. So yeah, if you get a chance between now and March 1st, it'll be up at the West Regional Branch Library. All right, let's get into the books. Let's talk about nonfiction. Starting with Pirating and Publishing the Book Trade in the Age of Enlightenment by Robert Darden. I mean, it's possible it's because I'm a librarian that I find this so interesting because it's about a very specific industry at a very specific moment in time, but it has wider effects. So in pre-revolutionary France, copyright wasn't firmly established yet. It was still, that law was still in its infancy. And meanwhile, all of France's publishing was heavily controlled by a group called the Paris Guild. It's essentially a monopoly. So there were a bunch of publishers outside of France who saw this as an opportunity. or saw it as a problem, depending on their ideology. Some of them because they felt that this inhibited free speech, wanted to produce more stuff, and others just saw this as a financial opportunity. So they started printing banned authors that were banned in France, and getting them into the hands of the French people. According to this author, the spread of these ideas helped influence the French Revolution, which is both a good thing, they needed a revolution, and a terrible thing if you've read anything about that revolution. It was just, I don't even have words. So violent, so terrifying, so bad. But Darden is also the director of Harvard's library, so a librarian, and he's written several books on this period of history in France. I think it'll be interesting, and if you're interested in it, it comes out February 1st. And as I always say with the nonfiction, we don't have early reviews. Nonfiction almost never has early reviews. It just doesn't. Okay, Pure America, Eugenics and the Making of Modern Virginia by Elizabeth Kate, I think. Kate. So between 1927 and 1979, more than 8,000 people were involuntarily sterilized in 5 different hospitals in Virginia. I find that horrifying, as naturally anyone would, but part of why I find it horrifying is because it's the middle of the 20th century. Like, finding out that that happened post-Civil War wouldn't be as big a surprise, but finding out that we were this far into the 20th century and they still thought that this was acceptable is pretty awful. The author argues that this was not a misguided action by well-intentioned people, but actually a way of controlling poor people. What I found interesting when I read the description of this book is I think it's going to touch on race, as well it should, and that matters, but I think it's also going to touch on social class a lot, which, based on Kate's previous work, makes sense. She wrote What You're Getting Wrong About Appalachia, which had 4 stars on Goodreads and is really well reviewed. Of course, there's no early reviews for this, but if you're interested in Pure America, it comes out February 2nd. All right, This Far and No Farther is a collection of photographs inspired by the voting rights movement by William Abinowitz. I don't know. William. Let's just call him William. Okay. So the author decided to revisit many of the significant sites in the South of famous photographs that were taken during the voting rights movement. So of course he goes to visit Selma, the bridge, all of the scenes of Bloody Sunday and that sort of thing. He's using this premise as a way to discuss history and where we are now. I don't know that it's going to be like a read from beginning to end kind of a book, but I think if you're in the library and you happen to see it on the new bookshelf, it might be worth picking up and flipping through to see some of the photographs. If you are interested in it, it comes out February 9th. All right. George Washington, The Political Rise of America's Founding Father by David O. Stewart. So we have a very defined image of George Washington, and it didn't occur to me until I read the description of this book. That's the image of someone like in their 50s. This author wants to point out, and I assume this is true, that in his mid-20s, Washington actually tanked his military career due to his oversized ego. So this is a story of how he becomes the person we see him as now, or some version of that, because I think we oversimplify him and we sort of make him a legend when it was in fact a human being. But the book examines how he came back from his military defeat, the people and the organizations around him that taught him various things about leadership and helped make him into the kind of leader he would be, and how all of those skills turned him into the person that we absolutely needed if we wanted to create America. So Stewart is an award-winning author of several American history books. I assume this is going to be pretty good and probably riveting, since it's about a part of Washington's life that we don't talk about as often. If you're interested in it, it comes out February 9th. All right. I I've been waiting to be able to tell you about this book for literally a couple months. I saw it on Gailey a while ago and was like, oh, I bet that's good. It's called We Had a Little Real Estate Problem, The Unheralded Story of Native Americans and Comedy by, wow, okay, Cliff Nesteroff, I think. Anyway, this is a portrait of Native Americans and their contributions to comedy specifically. The author argues that despite having produced not very many famous comedians, Native Americans have had a big impact on stand-up and other forms of comedy. The title comes from a joke that Native stand-up comedian Charlie Hill uses, and the joke is, my people are from Wisconsin, we used to be from New York, we have a little real estate problem. The author points out the larger social role that that exploring comedy in this way can have, or by these people, including just smashing stereotypes. One of the comedians he interviewed said, the American narrative dictates that Indians are supposed to be sad. It's not really true, and it's not indicative of the comedy experience itself, of the community experience itself. Laughter and joy is very much a part of Native culture. Nesteroff has written a ton of stuff about comedy. He calls himself the Encyclopedia of Comedy, and to prepare this book, he did hundreds of interviews and extensive research. I think it's probably going to be one of the more entertaining nonfiction titles of the year. If you're interested in it, it is going to come out February 16th. All right, let's run through the audio that's coming out in February. We're going to do this super fast because I've already discussed all of these books. And I don't think any of the stuff I'm mentioning today, like the 5 that I just did for nonfiction or the 5 that I'm about to do for genre, I don't think any of them are coming out on audiobook, but this other stuff is. Okay. On February 2nd, Mark Bittman's Animal Vegetable Junk, A History of Food from Sustainable to Suicidal. The Survivors by Jane Harper and The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna are all coming out on audiobook, and we will be buying them. We're also getting The Unwilling by John Hart and Luann Rice's The Shadow Box coming out the same day. Because they come out on February 2nd, the book comes out that day. The audiobook might not. So it may be a little more of a wait after that. And in general, COVID is slowing things down, just so you guys know. But this is the date I have to use. Okay, so on February 9th, we're getting Walk in My Combat Boots, which is James Patterson, or more likely, really, Matt Eversman. Never Enough, A Navy SEAL Commander on Living Life of Excellence, Agility, and Meaning by Mike Hayes. Never Far Away, which is fiction, by Michael Coryota. The Power Couple by Alex Bernson. Susan Mallory's The Vineyard at Painted Moon and Hide in Place will also come out on February 9th. And we are also getting Guilty Admissions, which I talked about last week, and I reviewed on our Goodreads page, and I'm going to review for Read Eat Repeat, and I highly recommend coming out on audiobook. The actual book comes out the 23rd. All right, let's move on to fiction after I get some tea. Okay. Starting off with A History of What Comes Next, A Take Them to the Stars novel by Sylvain Nouvelle, maybe a French name. Okay, so this is our surprise giveaway for the week. Da-da-da. I got this about a month ago, and I'm already regretting that I didn't read it before I gave it to you. I thought it would make a better prize if it wasn't dog-eared with all of my bookmarks and whatnot. And now I really want to read the book. Okay, so this is going to be book 1 in a series. I think we're doing like part science fiction, part historical fiction. But at any rate, our main character is Mia, and her families have the same mission for 99 generations, and that's shaping human history in order to get us into space, which I think is why the series is called the Take Me to the Stars novels, or the Take Me to the Stars series. The action for this book is going to take place in 1945's Berlin. She has to convince Werner von Braun to leave Germany for America. So, okay, I read this description and then sat here and talked to myself for like a while. I was going to let you look at me, but I can't. How do I do that? Oh, I do this. There we go. I've done a fair amount of research on the Holocaust specifically, and by extension, a little World War II stuff, just enough to know how much I don't know, because it's a vast subject. But she is working with real history here. Werner von Braun was a German rocket scientist who was a Nazi. And he, along with, I think, like 1,600 other scientists, technicians, maybe teachers, or something else, they were recruited to America from Nazi Germany at the end of the war. It was called Operation Paperclip, and it was an attempt to advance our scientific pursuits. Probably engineers. They probably bought scientists, engineers, and technicians. That sounds right. And like I said, Werner von Braun was one of them. He became one of the most visible and famous, but maybe infamous products of Operation Paperclip, because his rocket science technology 100% contributed to us getting to the moon. I think he actively worked at NASA in the 60s. He wouldn't have before that. And he was a controversial figure, I think, at the time of the moon landing, at the idea that we were working with this guy and that we had basically lifted him up from Nazi Germany, took him out of there, and brought him to America where he wouldn't face consequences for his part in some of the things that happened, was understandably controversial. See, this is why I sat here and talked to myself for 15 minutes about this and got totally sidetracked, because you start to ask yourself, well, what was he telling people? And I remember hearing someone explain the history of the space race and mentioning von Braun and saying that he had a really bizarrely, like, pragmatic response to why he was a Nazi, which is a really weird topic to have a pragmatic response to. He didn't moralize it at all. And like some of the stuff he said contradicted records, because the Germans kept extensive records. It's one of the reasons we talk about the Nazi propagated Holocaust against the Jewish people, because it is the dubious distinction of being the most well-recorded Holocaust in history, or genocide in history. But there's things like von Braun claimed that he didn't join the party until 1939, and it was because he hit an impasse in his career and he couldn't go any higher unless he was a member of the party, so he became a member of the party. Okay. The records say he joined in 1937. There's no reason 39 is better than 37, because either way, Hitler had been in power for years. The laws against the Jews had already been in place. But if you're like really going to look at this with hindsight, 39 is kind of worse than 37, because 39 is when things changed from being this intense social thing and laws and, you know, creating a second class of citizens who were Jewish. And 39 is when it becomes violent. So that's the big difference there. 39 is when Kristallnacht happened, which is the Night of Broken Glass. It's when basically the state decided to sanction the hunting and murdering of Jewish people and destroyed their homes and their businesses. So there's no way he didn't know that happened. So I don't understand. I assume it's to do with where he was in his career. It's all very weird. And I think, getting back to the book, now that I've rambled, we'll go back into this a little bit. This is going to be a really interesting, complicated book. There's no dealing with von Braun and the rocket scientists in Hitler's Germany and not ending up with, at the very minimum, deep into moral gray area. So if that's where she's starting, I think the series could be really interesting. They're recommending it for fans of Blake Crouch and Andy Weir, and I love Andy Weir. You see what I should have read it. I will try. Maybe I can get it from Gailey. I don't know. But it comes out February 2nd. All right, moving on. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back. Go back to this. If you want to win the history of what's next, put I want to win in the comments and your preferred location, your preferred MPL location for pickup. And I will choose a winner on Saturday morning, because today's my Saturday week. And I will send it to your preferred location. All right, so now we can move on to The Witch's Heart by, this is another one, Genevieve Gornichik. Okay. This is a first novel by the author, and it sort of reimagines Norse mythology, which I found fascinating because everything I know about Norse mythology comes from a Marvel movie. Our main character is named, the spelling is Angrboda. So I've been calling her Angry Buddha, which is probably not how that's pronounced. But at any rate, she's burned at the stake by Odin, and it doesn't kill her, it injures her. He's burning her at the stake because one of her witch powers is that she can see into the future, and she refuses to do that for him. So he burns her at the stake, and the injuries cause her to lose her foresight. She escapes, she runs away, and meets Loki in the forest, and they fall in love, and they have children, and they try to live virtually on the edge of the world to be as far from Odin's all-seeing eye as they can. But as she recovers and as the years go on, her powers start to come back, and she can now see a future for her children that is dire. So it's, what is she going to do about that? How is she going to, how is she going to protect her children and try and see a different future for them? I think it sounds really neat. And if its early reviews are putting it above 4 stars, which is very good. It comes out on February 9th. All right. An Absolute Book by Elizabeth Knox. Okay. This book seems really hard to describe based on what description I could find from the publisher. I even had to read a couple of early reader reviews on Goodreads, and their reviews were basically, this is really hard to describe. But what I do have about it is that it's an epic fantasy that's intimate in tone. Our main characters are Taryn, who is trying to put her sister's death by violence behind her. She's already tried revenge and it didn't work. A police officer who's investigating a cold case, and a shadowy young man who brings his shadows with him. The early reviews are putting it at 3.7 stars. It may be fascinating. It may be one of those books you have to just read the first chapter and see if, like, the tone and the voice of the author speaks to you. But if you're interested, it comes out February 9th. Okay. The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. This is science fiction. Martine is a genetically cloned replica that Evelyn made from her own award-winning research. There's one problem with that, though. Martine is having an affair with Evelyn's husband. So the other, and again, the description just sort of stops there, but it's been described as a nonstop thrill ride, perfect for readers of Big Little Lies and enthusiasts of Killing Eve and Westworld. One of the reviewers said it's more like Westworld meets Stepford Wives, but it currently has 3.98 stars on Goodreads from the early reviews, so very high. That sounds interesting. It's coming out February 16th. All right. Nope, that's the last one. Okay. Greg Bear and the Unfinished Land. Or The Unfinished Land by Greg Bear. It's our main character is tired of living in his little fishing village in England. So he gets on a boat, set out for adventure, and what he finds is a massive naval battle that he is the only survivor to. So he drifts for a while and then he's rescued, but then he and his rescuers are caught up in a current that takes them to an unknown island. On the island, he'll meet his destiny, which is all wrapped up in this battle between humans and gods. So some serious epic fantasy for this one too. There's only a handful of reviews. They're positive, they're not glowing, but they're still pretty positive. So if you're interested in The Unfinished Land, it comes out February 16th. All right. Don't forget to comment if you want to win. I want to win in the comments and your preferred branch for pickup. I am adding cute memes and cartoons and photos to Goodreads at all times. I'm also going to put my review of Bloodlines when I finish it up there. So if you want to join us there, our group just keeps growing. I think there's like 26 people in it now, which is lovely. And if you haven't already signed up for the MPL pre-orders newsletter, it has all of the books I discussed today, including the audiobooks. And you can click on each of the titles to go to the catalog. Put it on hold. Our final thought comes from Chris Fleming. She says books would be 20 pages if they didn't describe the woods, which is probably true. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next week. Oh, and next week we begin March, so March hits.